Well, there once lived a boy called Jack, and Jack was the most kind and loving and thoughtful boy you could ever imagine. And he lived in the middle of the country with his mother in a teeny weeny tumble-down cottage, and the walls were painted white and it had a thatched roof, and outside they had a well for drawing the water, and out the back they had a byre with some cows so that they had butter and they had milk. And Jack's job was that he was a shepherd. And Jack loved his job because he liked to be in the middle of nature, with all of the trees and all of the flowers and all of the little creatures. And when Jack was out working in the fields, well, sometimes he'd sit on the side of the hill and all of the little creatures, his friends, would come and sit next to him. All of the squirrels and the rabbits and the badgers and the foxes and the beavers. And the birds, all of the robins and the little jenny wrens and the swifts and the martins, well, they would come and sit in the trees next to Jack and they would sing to him. And Jack spent so much time in the middle of the country with all of the creatures, he could actually understand their language. And every day Jack's mummy, well, she would come and she'd bring him something to eat for lunch. She'd bring him some sandwiches and a drink. And Jack would sit there on the hillside with all of his friends around him. As his mother, well, she would wander around the hedgerow. And she would gather the wool that had been left there by the sheep and the baby lambs. And she would put it into her pockets. And when she got home, she would put that wool onto her spinning wheel, and the air would be filled with the rhythmic clickety-clack as the spinning wheel turned around and turned the wool from the little sheep and the baby lambs into balls of wool for her to do her knitting. And well, Jack and his mother, they lived together very happily, all apart from one thing. And that was the laird, the master of the black arts, Jack's boss, because he was a cruel, wicked, spiteful man. He was always shouting at everybody. He made the people in that village, well, he made their lives a misery, and all that he paid Jack for a whole week's work was 1 penny, just 1 penny. But still, life went on. Jack continued with his job, looking after all of the wee creatures. But one day when he went into the fields, he was counting the sheep and he realised some of the baby lambs were missing. Well, he searched in the field and he wandered down to the bottom of the valley where a huge, great river rushed along. And as Jack looked for the baby lambs, he saw a fish, a big salmon, dive up out of the water and sink back down. But there was something strange, because Jack felt there was a sort of chill in the air, a strange sort of sensation. And there was a wind started to blow and he could hear the trees moving, their branches rustling. And then all of the birds, well, they started flying backwards and forwards, making a terrible commotion. And Jack, well, he felt a chill go down his spine and he listened to the birds and he listened carefully. And he heard them say this: "Tonight's the night. Tonight's the night. Tonight's the night." Well, Jack wondered, what is it that the birds mean? Tonight's the night. And well, he found the wee baby lambs and he gathered them together, and then when he went home he got into the cottage and his mother was there. She was sitting in front of the turf fire with a big black pot of soup hanging over the top of it. And when he went in he said, "Mother," he said, "do you know, a strange thing happened today. Because some of the baby lambs, well, they were missing, and I went and I searched everywhere, and when I got down to the bottom of the valley, well, there was a strange sort of chill came in the air. And the trees started moving and rustling the branches, and the birds, well, they caused a terrible commotion. They started flying all over the place. And when I listened to them, they said this. They said, "Tonight's the night. Tonight's the night. Tonight's the night." well, said Jack's mother. Jack, she said, do you know that there's a saying? They say once every 100 years, old Crowley the oak tree and all of the trees, that they dance. They lift themselves up out of the resting place where their roots grow down into the earth, and they dance. And Jack, it's been said that in those holes, the resting place of the trees, that there is lots and lots of treasure to be found. But many people have tried to find this treasure, and they've never, ever been seen again. So promise me, Jack, promise me you won't go out, promise me if it's tonight. But Jack looked at his mother and he said, but mother, he said, you know that I'm a really sensible lad, and I couldn't miss it, not for the world. If it's only once every 100 years that old Crowley and the oak trees lift themselves up out of the resting place and they dance. Oh, mother, he said, I couldn't miss it. She said, but Jack, she said, it's very dangerous. Please, she said, I don't want you to go. He said, but mother, he said, you know I'll take good care. And she said, well, Jack, if you must go, then please take this with you. And she reached into her pocket and she took out a little ladder made completely of wool, and she put it into Jack's hand. And she said, Jack, she said, take this ladder, she said, for this is no ordinary ladder. If you're scared, if you're worried, if you don't know what to do, well, this is a magic ladder, she said, and it will help you. So please, will you take it? And Jack said, thank you, Mummy, he said. And he put it into his pocket and he gave his mother a kiss. And he walked out of the cottage and headed towards the fields. But you know, he hadn't got very far when who should come towards him but his sweetheart Jeanie. But when she came close, well, he could tell she didn't look too happy. Her face was sort of red and flushed and she looked anxious. And Jack said, Jeanie, what's the matter? And she said, oh, Jack, it's the master of the black arts. It's the laird. He's in a terrible mood. Oh, he's shouting at everyone and he's greeting. And he says, nobody is allowed out tonight. And if he finds anybody disobeying him, that they're going to lose their jobs and they're going to have to leave their homes on the land. Well, said Jack, I wonder if it's anything to do with what happened to me today, Jeanie, because you see, there were a few baby lambs who were missing in the field, and when I searched for them, there was a chill came in the wind, and the trees, well, they started rustling their leaves, and the birds, they started to make a terrible commotion, and I heard them all say this. They said, tonight's the night, tonight's the night, tonight's the night. And well, my mother told me that once every 100 years, old Crowley and all of the trees, that they lift themselves up out of their resting places, and that they dance, and that in the holes beneath them where they left their roots, that there's lots and lots of treasure to be had. And my mother thinks that maybe the birds were telling us that tonight's the night. Oh, Jack, said Jeanie, well, I've heard that story as well, she said, but don't you know that anyone who's tried to find the treasure and who's seen the trees dance, that they've never, ever been seen again. So promise me, she said, you won't go out tonight, will you, Jack? Especially as the laird has said, no one is allowed out. Oh, but Jeanie, he said, you know, I couldn't miss it for the world. Not if it's only once every 100 years that old Crowley the oak tree dances. Look, Jeanie, he said, why don't you go down to my mother, have a nice cup of tea, and I'll be back later, I promise I'll take care. And Jeanie said, Jack, she said, I really wish that you wouldn't go this tonight, but I'll go to your mother's house and I'll wait as you said. And he gave Jeanie a big cuddle, and then she set off down the lane to his mother's wee cottage. And Jack, well, sat down at the top of the field, and all of his friends, the little rabbits and the badgers and the foxes and the beavers, they came and they sat beside him. And after a while, Jack could hear strange music. It was harp music. And then Jack, well, he could see that the trees, they were starting to sway. He could see their branches moving, and then he could feel beneath him that the earth started to move. It was sort of rumbling, and then he saw old Clovey the oak tree. He lifted himself up out of his resting place, and he started to dance. And then all of the trees, one by one, silver birches, beech trees, copper beech trees, they all started to lift themselves out of their resting place, and they started to dance down the hill, locking their branches, doing reels and jigs. Jack had never ever seen anything so magical in his life, when all of a sudden a big hand came down on his shoulder, and when he swung round, it was the laird. It was his boss, the master of the black art. And he said, "Jack, what do you think you're doing when I said nobody's allowed out tonight?" "Oh, master," he said, "but I just came because I heard old Clovey the oak trees, and the trees were—" "I don't care what you heard, Jack. I'm telling you, boy, you'd better get home to that cottage to your mother, because if you don't, you won't have a job tomorrow, and I'm telling you and your mother can get out of my cottage." And before Jack could say anything else, he watched the laird. He walked up through the trees as they danced, and when he got to the top of the hill, he reached old Clovey's resting place, and he had a huge sack over his shoulder, and Jack watched the laird, and he leapt deep down into old Clovey's resting place, while all of the trees were dancing. And Jack, well, out of the corner of his eye, in one of the resting places where one of the trees had been, Jack could see that something was glistening, something was sparkling. And Jack walked over to the end of the hole, and when he looked down inside, he could see that the hole was filled with treasure. Jack jumped down, and there was a crunchy sound beneath his feet. It was filled with diamonds, blue sapphires, green emeralds, red rubies. There were crowns, there were tiaras, there was piles of gold and silver, there were pearls from the depths of the ocean. Jack looked around, he couldn't believe his eyes. And as he walked around, well, he saw one ring that caught his eye. It was made of silver, and in it was an amber stone. When Jack looked at this ring, he thought, "This will make a beautiful present for my mummy." And so he put it in his pocket. And as he looked around, again something caught his eye. It was a ring made of gold with a deep green emerald, and the green in the emerald reminded Jack of the colour of Jeannie's green, sparkling eyes. And he thought, well, that ring will make a wonderful present for Jeannie. And so he put that in his pocket. And well, Jack didn't want anything for himself, because he had everything he needed in life. He had a loving family and a job that he loved, a roof over his head and food in his stomach. And so Jack started to try to climb out of the hole. But as he did, the earth, which was damp, came loose in his hand, and Jack began to panic, and he started to try and climb more and more to get out of the hole. But the more that he tried to climb out, the deeper Jack sank. Deeper and deeper and deeper into the hole, and Jack became scared when all of a sudden he heard a voice from the top and it said, "Jack, Jack, is that you, Jack?" And when he looked up, who should it be but his sweetheart, Jeanie. "Yes, Jeanie," he said, "I'm here, but I can't get out of the hole. I've tried, but I just keep going deeper and deeper, Jeanie." She said, "But Jack," she said, "you've got to get out of the hole, because old Crovey, the oak tree, and the trees, they're all slowing down the dance. You're going to get squashed, Jack. Come on, give me a hand." But although Jeanie stretched her hand deep into the hole, Jack couldn't reach it. He said, "Jeanie," said, I can't reach it, but you must, Jack, you're going to get squashed." And then Jack remembered his mother had given him something special, something magical, the magical ladder. And Jack took it out of his pocket and he said, "Jeanie," he said, "catch!" And he threw the ladder and Jeanie, well, she caught one end. He said, "Hold on tight, Jeanie." And then one hand over the other. And Jack climbed up the ladder and out of the hole and into Jeanie's arms. She said, "Oh, Jack, I'm so glad that you're safe." He said, "But Jeanie," said, "it's the laird, the master of the Black Arts. He's in old Crovey's hole. He's going to get squashed by the trees." And the two of them, they ran up the hill. And as they ran up, the trees were slowing down the dance. And they didn't notice Jack and Jeanie rush up between them until they reached old Crovey's hole. And when they looked inside, there was the laird, the master of the Black Arts, and he had the big sack, and into it he was shoving all of the treasure, all of the gold, all of the silver, all of the coins. And Jack shouted, "Master, master," he said, "stop," he said, "old Crovey and the trees, they're slowing down the dance. You're going to get squashed. Come on, give me a hand." But the laird stopped only for a moment, and he looked at Jack and he said, "Jack, what do you think you're doing? I told you to get home to your mother, to the cottage, and now I'm telling you, you won't have a job here with me anymore, laddie. And you and your mother, you can get out to that cottage in the morning." And he turned and he continued shoving the gold and the silver, stuffing it into his sack. But Jack, when he said, "But no, come on, master," he said, "just give me a hand." But he didn't even hear Jack. And the ground began to shake and rumble as old Crovey and the trees came up the hill, and Jack and Jeanie moved back out of the way just as old Crovey sank deep down into its resting place. And the laird, the master of the Black Arts, was never ever seen again. And Jack and Jeanie, well, they went home to the cottage, and Jack's mother was so pleased to see that he was safe. And Jack gave Jeanie the green emerald ring that he'd found. And Jack gave his mother the amber ring. And you know, from that day onwards, all of the people in that area lived so much more happily without the laird shouting and greeting and being spiteful and cruel. And while Jack, he stayed living with his mother, working in the fields, looking after the sheep and the baby lambs. And as time went by, he built a little house next to his mother's, and he and Jeanie got married. And they gave his mother lots and lots of grandchildren. And that story was given to me by a great friend, the master storyteller Stanley Robertson. And every year the travellers would stop in the north of Scotland, outside Aberdeen, in a place called Lunfannon. And that is where old Crowley, the oak tree, is. And anybody there will tell you which tree old Crowley is. But the only thing they might not be able to tell you is the next time the trees